Okay, so here's the quick tutorial on the ins and outs of using FlipAnim. Um, First, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the drawing tools, which are hovering over here. We have what is the pencil tool. And at the same time as I'm talking about the pencil tool, come down here and you'll see these different options actually are the line weight itself. So I can select a various line weight. So I have the pencil tool drawn, and I can draw a line. I can draw, and you can see that they basically, as I click on each consecutive thing, it gets thicker and thicker and thicker. Okay, so this is basically line weight. Okay, I'll next show you undo. The red arrow right here allows me to undo things if I made a mistake. Blue arrow allows me to redo. Okay, so I'm just going to undo back to the beginning. Another way, if you want to be more specific, if you've drawn something that you like, okay, but maybe, got a little bit of an error somewhere along the way, you can also use the eraser tool, okay, and maybe I want to erase just a specific spot, okay. I can also change the size of my eraser, okay, to make it easier to erase larger things, okay. So we have pencil, eraser. We have this tool right here, which is the fill tool, okay. This fill tool, essentially, if I click down here is all my colors, I can select a color, and I can then just click inside that space. Notice it filled it in. It's very important to be very careful as you're filling in, because it will only work if what you're trying to fill in is completely enclosed. To illustrate this, I will select a black color, I will come up to the pencil, and I will draw another shape, but this time I will leave a slight gap right there. Now usually this happens when you're doing a thinner line drawings, and you might have kind of inadvertently not really see that there's a gap there. One way to see if there's a gap when you're trying to fill is to use the zoom in and zoom out tool, okay? So if I zoom in, right, and then the zoom move tool, which is right next to it, okay, I can actually move around my stage, okay, with the move tool, and then zoom back out. So you can see if I zoom in, I move around, there's a little gap right there, okay, and there's a big gap right there. So I'm going to zoom out. Why that's problematic is if I click on the fill tool now, and I select a color, and then I try to fill in, it ends up escaping out of that little gap and then filling the entire stage itself, which is what we don't want. So I'll hit undo. One way to quickly remedy that is get your pencil tool, select the color you were using, find the right line weight. I could zoom in. Sometimes I find it's very helpful to zoom in to see where that gap is, and then with the pencil tool, just kind of fill in that gap a little bit. And now, if I use the paint bucket tool or fill tool, and I select that color, when I click on it, it'll fill in. I'll zoom back out. Okay. Um, what else do we have? We have these other drawing tools. This one right here is basically paint behind objects. So, and it kind of each paint has a little bit of a transparency. So let me show you this works. This is red right here, but I'm gonna switch the color to blue, so you'll see how this works. I'm gonna also change the width of my pencil up a little bit, the line weight, and now when I draw behind that shape, notice it's the color is behind it, but it's also creating a transparency underneath that color. I don't use these that a lot, but they can be handy for sort of shading, and when you're shading that you want to go outside the area or kind of create some kind of value change or changing the color. I'm just going to undo that right there. But basically what this does is it draws behind marks with another color. Okay, the one right next to it draws on top of marks, and it doesn't allow you to escape to the outside. So using the same color blue, watch what happens when I draw over the shape. If I go past the edge, notice it's not drawing in the stage area. It literally is just filling over the top of an existing thing, but ending at the edge. Now this I find very handy when you're doing kind of shading and you don't want to accidentally go outside the circle. So if I like pick a different color green here, and I want to shade that green darker, right, I can shade it, and it kind of goes right up against the edge really nicely, and it doesn't it doesn't go over the edge, if you will. Okay, so it kind of helps you keep things edges clean. It's kind of nice. This one right here that looks like a paint roller right here actually is sort of a transparency paint that paints directly over the top of everything. So just so you can see how that works, let's say I take purple. If I'm doing this, you can't notice it's like it's purple, but as soon as you go over the top of it, again, see, oh, sorry, it's like painting behind it, and there's sort of a transparency as well. Okay, so that's how those drawing tools work. Now, I particularly, I find that I'm using mostly the pencil and the draw on top of one, but not as much the roller and these other transparencies that go behind, but you may find a use for them. The last tool up here I want to show you is the eyedropper tool, and this one basically allows you to select an existing color that you may have created. So before using this tool, I'm going to just actually show you how to use what is called the color palette tool down here. Okay, it just looks like a little palette. They come with presets right here. So if I click on this color palette and I adjust it and I make a bunch of palettes, I can always go back to the default by clicking the trash can. Okay, and it says restore all default colors, and I would click yes. Okay, and that basically, and I'll click on this to close the palette to close the window back down. It goes back to the default color palette that it started with. But if I want to create some unique colors, like let's say, and rather than this orange, I'm going to make some other color, I can click on that palette. It automatically goes to the orange that it is. So if I wanted to make a darker value of that orange, I could drag the circle down to make that color a little bit darker. It makes sort of like a brownish color right here. Or I could drag it the other way to kind of tint it out to kind of make it a palish orange. Or, you can play around with that. Okay. You can also drag the different hues. So we learned about this in Art Studio, right? You can through all of your hues, right? Your oranges, your reds, your violets, your greens, right? And you can pick through that. You can also create transparent colors. So you see down here, this is fully opaque, meaning solid. And if I drag it this way, it slowly gets more and more transparent until it's basically invisible and not a color anymore. So you can play around with this color palette. And you can see where it is and make your own unique colors. And then when you're done, you close it down. And let's say I made that unique color and do that again. Just make a little darker blue. Okay, and I'm using my pencil tool. And kind of I've, drawn. And pencil, by the way, draws on top of everything. No matter what it is, it'll draw on top of everything. But let's say I lost that color by accident. I went and I deleted all and went back to the default, and I wanted to get back to that really nice steel blue. Okay, what I could do is use the eyedropper tool, and whatever color I have selected down here, so this orange is selected, if I click the eyedropper tool on that steel blue, boom, it changes to that color that I had already pre-mixed before, but might have lost. Okay, so that's the eyedropper tool. Let me delete everything off the stage. So up here, this tool is basically the trash button. It completely clears everything of a project. Okay, so I basically I can clear the whole entire screen. There's another way to do it, and I'll show you that later on. So this I'm just going to delete, go back to the beginning. Okay, start fresh. So for this purposes, the next tools I'm going to show you. Okay, I'm just going to draw a little object. Okay, quickly, I'm going to draw a circle. Going to fill it in. Okay, and then I'm also so that should be pretty good. So this tool right here, this one right here is the move tool. Okay, so by clicking on this, I can click and move an object to various places on the stage. This one with the blue arrow, the blue square with the arrows pointing out, resizes it so I can make things larger and smaller on the stage. Okay. And the last one is to rotate. So I can rotate around a central point. So if I click here, it's going to rotate around that place that I put. Right? If I click in the center, it kind of rotates around wherever you first put your mouse or your pen. Okay, rotate. So these are called the transform tools. Okay, we've got the zoom tool, the zoom move tool. We already explained that. Okay, we undo. Okay, so that's a lot of the general drawing and painting kind of thing. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead and go to some of the more now to the side of the animation and how we can work. So that's what we've done. If you look up at the top up here, we've been creating in one frame. So up at the top, this is basically indicates a frame. So I have a blue circle shape, in a frame. I'll just move it up to the top here, okay? And now, when we're creating animations, we're obviously going to be making multiple frames, okay? I also want to show you that we have over here what are called the layers and what is called paper. Paper is basically the background, okay? Everything goes on top of that. Layers start with the first layer that you make, and then every layer that you add will make the object that you draw in it on top of all of those other layers. So it's going to be important for you to think about what layer do you, if you're creating an animation, to think about it ahead of time and what things might float over the top of other things and what things might be behind other things and create them accordingly. Because unfortunately you can't drag one layer above another layer after it's already created. Okay, so, but frames. A couple of different ways to do frames. I can click on this green plus sign and it adds a second frame. Now notice the first frame, the drawing that's inside of that, is now transparent in frame 2. We call this an onion skin. In this program, if I click on the gear down here, they call it a hint frame. Okay, so I can hide that hint frame by clicking on the gear down here and clicking on that little stick figure, or bring it back. Okay, personally, I think it's a good idea to keep it there as we're moving through animation because it's a very helpful thing. Okay, and I'll show you why. So I could now redraw this object again. I could start and redraw another circle, starting with the black, getting the right time, and I try to create that circle exactly as I'm moving through space. And then I click on the fill tool and I pick the color blue and I fill it in. And so now I have two shapes, and I was pretty good about drawing the right size. But sometimes when you're doing this kind of animation, what is called straight ahead animation, a lot of times you're doing some transformation things. So let me just go ahead and undo those two things. You start to try to create things being a little bit different and transforming as they move. So let me just start with black line again. So I could start to have this circle start to change into a different form by maybe sort of stretching it out a little bit, okay? And then the next frame, I might stretch it out a little bit more. And then in the next frame, I might really stretch it out as it's coming off the stage, as if it just darted off the stage, okay? And then I can fill those in with the blue. I can go back, and so you can click on each frame and consecutively go back and back and back and back, right? So let me just erase. That's fine. All right, just so you can get a sense of it, okay? So you can see something's kind of changing here and moving, okay? So that's the idea of frames. You can continually add frames. You saw what I just here. I'm hitting the play button and the pause button to stop moving on an animation. You can also delete frames. Like that last frame wasn't quite right, okay? It had two objects in it. Didn't really want it. But you can also copy existing information from a frame into the other one by using this plus sign with the two different pieces of paper under it. If I click on that, it actually notice frame 3 and frame 4 now are exactly the same. But then I could use my move tool and slightly move that, okay? And then I could create another frame and oops, I delete that one. I'm going to copy that frame, click on the move tool and slightly move it over, okay? So again, now you can see that you're kind of creating a little transformation, so it's like this circle that kind of swooshes off the stage, if you will. Okay, so I'm going to hit pause again. So those are frames, okay? Up here, this blue arrow allows me to go to the previous frame. The blue arrow on the right allows me to skip to the next frame. And this is handy when you have multiple frames. When you end up with like 25 frame animation, there's only about 10 frames can fit on the stage or the timeline at a time in the screen. So this is handy to just quickly go back to the previous frames or advance to the frames that are further ahead. Okay, so that's frames. Now I'm going to skip over here again to layers, okay, just to get a little bit more into that. The paper layer, as I said, is literally the background layer. So a lot of times you might use this one to fill in a solid color, maybe, or you can draw your background on there. For this purpose of this, I'm just going to fill it in a solid color and maybe draw just a little teeny background. So I'm going to use my fill tool, and I'm just going to pick a random color. I'm making sure, notice it's selected in red to make sure that I'm in that layer. Now I'm in frame 5 right here, but this is the thing about the paper. It doesn't matter what frame you're in when you're clicking on the paper, because the paper is going to essentially be underneath all of the frames that exist. Okay, so if I click on that and hit this, notice now it's purple behind every single frame. Okay, this is not true if the paper was empty and I created some other object. Any layers, only whatever you draw on the layer, you have to actually copy and paste into each individual frames, and I'll explain that in a minute. Okay, so here we have, the start of a little animation. On layer 1, you can see each frame is a different image. Okay, the paper layer is solid through the thing. I'm going to click down here on these tools down here. You see there's a green plus sign. If I click on that, notice it added a layer directly above the other one. So I'm going to come back, notice I'm on frame 5 here. I'm going to come back to frame 1, and I'm just going to draw another object. So if I click on that, and I'll just draw it in green just so you can really see this now object. If I draw this over the top, okay, and I fill that in, okay, you see that this is only drawn in frame 1, but they're two separate objects. And this is very important because I might want to now click on the transform tool and move that green object somewhere else, right? And notice it doesn't affect what's happening in layer 1, okay? And that's very important, okay? If I click on layer 1 and I click on the move tool, notice, right, whatever in the second layer does not get affected. And that's going to be very important as you're creating animations that have multiple objects or multiple moving pieces. You want to be able to independently move one thing while the other things stay where they are. Okay, very important. Okay, so but notice though, if I click to frame 2, that green circle disappeared. Now there's a couple ways that we can deal with that, right? I could click on this and redraw, but I can't use this plus the duplicate copy frame anymore, because this is different. If I copy this frame, it's going to add a new frame in between these. I'll show you, right? So I'm on frame 1. If I click on this, notice it just added another frame with that thing in there and advanced those other ones. But I want to get that green circle into frame 3. So let me undo, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to click on frame 1, and I'm going to click on layer 2. Notice how they're both selected. They're both by showing the red outline around them. And down here in this menu down here, there's a little green arrow and a little red arrow. The green arrow copies information that is on a frame on a particular layer into the memory of the computer or the phone or the tablet that you're using. Okay, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to click on that green arrow facing up, and then I'm going to click on frame 2. Okay, notice you can see the onion skin of where the first image was on frame 1, but nothing on frame 2. So to paste it, I'm going to click on the red arrow pointing down, and that essentially pastes that green circle back on there. Then again, I can click on the move tool, or this time actually I'll just show the scale tool for this animation. I'm going to start scaling this down, like it's kind of disappearing into space. Okay, so I scaled that one down, and then I'm going to now click on that frame, and I'm going to copy it, green arrow, and click on frame 3, and I'm going to paste. So notice it, put it in the exact same space. I'm using my transform tool, making a little bit smaller. Click on the green arrow to copy, click on frame 4, click on the red arrow to paste, use my transform tool to make it a little bit smaller. Click on frame 5, click on frame 4 again, copy, green arrow, frame 5, paste, transform tool, smaller. Okay, so now when I play it, right, got a sense that these two independent layers, layer 1 and layer 2, are all working in those frames, okay, but they're working on separate layers, okay? Very important concept as we're moving forward, okay? So what else do we have? I'm going to pause again. All right, we're almost done with all the tools for this program, okay? We have delete what's in the frame, okay, or we have delete a layer. Let's say I didn't like that layer. Well, I'm just going to add a layer because I do like that layer. If I added a layer and I didn't want it, I can then delete it by clicking on the red arrow, okay? And then it says remove the selected layer, and you would just click OK. Okay. If you wanted to, I could put a layer in between these two layers. by clicking on the layer and then clicking on the green plus sign. Notice it added it in between those two layers. So that's going to be a helpful thing as you're thinking about where layers are. Unfortunately, you can't put a layer behind the first layer. You have to be a little bit specific about that. So sometimes I think of that first layer as my background layer, and everything else I put above it because it helps to, just in terms of organization. But I'm going to delete that layer again. Okay, and then now I'm just going to also show you that I can delete information from a specific frame in a specific layer. So I'm on frame 5 right here, and I'm going to go up to layer 2, and I'm just going to click on that trash can here. It's not going to delete the whole project like we did that first time, right? It's going to only delete the information from the frame on a specific layer. So if I click it and I say click OK, right? Notice it deleted just from frame 5. None of the other things, only from that layer. That's the only thing it deleted. Okay, I'm gonna, you can't undo that, unfortunately, so if you delete it, that's it, you're done. So just make sure you know that that's what you want to do. Okay, let me just do that again though, because I like that little animation. I'm gonna copy it. I'm gonna click on frame 5, paste it, transform, smaller, done. Okay. Last couple of things here. We have this little eyeball down at the bottom here allows us to hide a layer. So if I click on this, notice it hid what was in a specific layer, right? If I click on this layer, it hides that. I can hide both layers, okay? I can hide everything all at once, the background, right? So that's basically what that does. And you'll see why that's helpful as you're getting multiple layers and you want to kind of, do the layer that's behind it, and it's hard to animate because the thing on top of it is blocking it, so you kind of hide one layer. You'll see why that's important later. Okay, so right now I've got a little animation and we're almost done with all the tools. I'm going to show you, what's the last thing to show you? Yes, this little gear down here, okay? This, after you've done all your animations, got everything working, or you're not finished for the day, it's very important that you save your project, okay? And the way we're going to be doing it is clicking on that gear, and notice the red arrow down basically allows you to download this project from FlipAnim to whatever device you're using, your phone, your laptop, or your computer. 9 times out of 10, it gets saved into your downloads folder, okay? Now, I'm going to have a separate lesson specifically just on the saving so you can see where it goes, but just I want you to know that that's the most important thing to hit at the end of every day to make sure you save your work, okay? So I would click that, it saved everything into memory. If I click on the gear and I click on the green one, it would allow me to upload from a specific folder somewhere on my computer, tablet, or phone. Now, I'm not going to show you that today, but I just want you to know that that's how we're going to save and upload our projects every single day to work on them. And the last thing, and the reason I'm saving it for last, is this one that says save. Ignore it. It's not really saving anything. What it is doing, though, is allowing you to share it. So after we've saved our projects over here, right, with the gear, and everything's working, we've got it, because that file that you saved to your computer, you're going to be putting into Google Classroom, you can then share your work, and it converts it into a different video format. And I'm going to have a specific video on that. But this one that says saved, do not be confused. It doesn't really save. What it does do is it allows you to convert it into a file format like a GIF or an MP4 that will then allow you to share it to like the internet, okay, different social media platforms, etc. So don't hit that one to save, okay? What you do want to save is this gear at the bottom and that red arrow. That is exactly how you save the project, okay? So I think that should about cover it, all the tools that are here in FlipAnim. I hope you have fun exploring and playing around with them as we move through the animation course and all the different kind of animation theory that we're working with. Oh, I'm so silly. I forgot the last thing I forgot. Here we go. See, it says fast and slow right here. This little blue dot right here. This is essentially what we consider the frame rate. Right now, all of these frames are at a consistent speed, okay? But if I want to speed them all up consistently, and I highly recommend you do it. Sometimes it gets a little wonky if you start slowing down some and speeding up others, but you want to, most animation programs don't really allow you to do that. keeps a consistent frame rate of, let's say, 24 frames per second. And we'll get more into that. But if I want to keep a consistent, if I want to speed up something that didn't, I would click on frame 1. Let's say I'm going to drag it all the way to fast. Click on frame 2, drag it all the way to fast. Click on 3, fast. Click on 4, fast. And you'll see what it did. It actually sped up the animation by making the frame rate of each frame just a little bit faster. Okay? Now, you may not like that, so you may want to bring it down. But what I highly recommend is that you're consistent. Keep your frame rate the same for all of the different frames, and it will make your animations smoother and more, like I said, consistent. Okay? So that is, yes, everything that I can think of that you could need to learn for this program and software. I will be doing the video on saving and publishing in the next video.